friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using a whole bunch of Lawn Fawn sets, including Grrr-ific Friend, Elfie Selfie, Bicycle Built for You, Crazy Antics, Coaster Critters, and Critters at the Dog Park. So Grrr-ific Friend was a freebie with a $60 purchase from the latest Lawn Fawn release, but if you missed out on it, I wanted to show you that you can still recreate a card similar to mine using the lion from Wild For You. The die to that lion also matches the lion from Grrr-ific Friends, so I'll be using that today. But I have stamped all my images out with some jet black ink on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm going to begin with my elephant, and for her I'm going to use W1, W3, and W5. I'm starting with the W5 and laying in some shadows on the underside of her face, along the back of her ears and her legs. I also added a little definition on the top of her trunk, especially where those little crinkle marks are drawn in, and then also down her back and her tail. And then I'm going to begin to blend that out with the W3, making sure to really scrub over the edge of the W5 and get that broken up and nicely blended. I will also be doing a second layer of coloring on all of these images off screen. What I do is I just go over the image one more time with the same exact colors before I put my markers away. I'm going to do it off screen to save some time in the video because this is already kind of a long one, but just know that I'm doing that. It just helps boost that saturation and gives you a nice smooth blend. So I'm going to go to my W1 now, which is going to be my highlight shade, and begin to fill in all the rest of the elephant. I'm also going to color the inside of her ear, even though I'll be adding some pink to that later on. I like to have that gray undertone. It helps that pink look a little bit more natural. I left a little room around her eye in case I wanted to go lighter, but decided to just use the W1 for that as well. And then I let that dry after the second layer, and now I'm going to go back in and add a little bit of dot detail just to give her a little bit more of that wrinkly texture that elephant skin has and give her a little more personality. So I started with the darkest color, my W5, and then I'm going in with the W3, and I'll even add a touch of the W1, and I typically just put that in the darkest shadowed areas, and that is going to dry back a bit and kind of all work together and be a little bit softer. Next, I'm moving on to the mouse, and for him I'm going to use E40, E41, E42, and E43. So I'm starting with the E43 and shading the back of his body. So since he's facing toward the right, his shadows are going to be down the left. So I use the E43 first, blend it out with the E42, and then I'm going to finish the majority of his body with that E41. I'll also add just a touch of that E41 to the belly and then blend out the belly with the E40. And I added a touch of that in the ear as well. And then I'm moving on to my girl, and for her skin, I'm using E000, E00, and E11. So I'm putting a little shadow with that E11 under her hairline and on her neck, and also on the underside of her arms and legs, and blend it out with the E00, and then finish with the E000 for the highlight. And I wanted to make her a blonde, so I chose E50, E51, and E53 for her hair. I'm adding the little E50 where I eventually want the darkest places to be, kind of mapping those places out, and then darkening them up with the E51, and then the E53. So the front part of her hair, and then also behind her neck and the ends. And then I'll blend back out in the reverse with the E51 and then the E50, so she'll have a little highlight area near her part. And then I'm going to move on to my lion. For his yellow parts, I'm going to use YR20, YR21, and YR23. This yellow combo has a little bit of a brown undertone, so I think it looks kind of natural for a lion. And I use the YR23 as my darkest. I'm blending toward the center of his face with the YR21, keeping that highlight in the center since he's facing completely forward. And then I'll use the YR20 to fill in the rest of him, colored right over his nose because I'm going to do that in a darker color in just a minute. For his mane, I'm going to use E55, E57, and E59. So I'm going to start with that E59 and almost draw a ring around his face. I want the hair to be darkest at the roots and then get lighter as it gets toward the tips. So then I'll come in with the E57 and begin to blend that out and just kind of carry that about another third of the way or so. On the top, I actually left even more highlight area because the sun would be hitting there more than on the under part. So then I'll take my E55 and just fill in all the rest of that until that's nice and blended, and that's going to get a lot more blended on that second layer as well. I find that these particular shades of brown often do look much nicer on that second coat. I'm going to do the tail using that E59 on the underside and blending toward the top, and then I'm going to color his nose with the E59. And now that my girl and all of my critters are colored, I'm going to go back and add some rosy cheeks to everybody and also color the insides of my critters' ears. And I'm using R11 and R20 for that. So I did the inside of the elephant's ear, and then I'll give her a rosy cheek using that R20 and then blending out the edges with the R11. I'm going to do the same on the little mouse and also gave him a pink nose with that R20. And I will even give the lion some rosy cheeks and color the inside of his ears as well. So I wanted to alter this dog bowl to look like one of those circus drums that my lion is going to be standing on. So I'm just drawing some triangles on the lower part of that with a pencil, and then I'm going to take a Memento dual-tipped marker and just go over my lines, and I'm going to trace over each one of them twice so that it's about the same width as the stamped lines so that it all looks nice and cohesive. And then I'll take a white eraser and just erase any of those remaining pencil lines. So now I'm going to begin to color in my accessories, and I wanted to keep a really simple color palette for all of those. I wanted to do it in red, yellow, and teal. So for my red combo, I'm using R24, R29, and R39. And I'm going to do one of these balloons. I put the R39 down toward the bottom left, blend it up toward the top right. And then I'm also going to do the flower that is in the lion's mouth with these shades. And I'm also going to do the band on the top hat. So I put the R39 on both edges and I'm blending toward the center so it looks nice and rounded. For my yellow combo, I wanted to do something that was really bright and primary yellow. So I chose Y13, Y15, and Y17. I'm going to continue coloring the balloons in that same way with the darkest at the bottom left, lightest at the top right. I'm going to color the top of the drum and the 3 top triangles with these shades as well. So I started with the Y17, I'm blending out with the Y15, and then I'll add a little of that Y13 for the highlight. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to color the little center of the flower and also the pennant banner. So I just put the darkest on the bottom and blended toward the top on that. And then for my teal combo, I'm going to use BG32, BG45, and BG49. I'm going to finish off that last balloon. And then I'm going to jump over to my girl's dress. I wanted her to have a beautiful teal dress that I'm going to glitter up later on. But for right now, I'm using that BG49 at the bottom and down her back. I'm also going to give her some shoes to match. And then I'm blending that out with the BG45. And then I'll add that BG32 in the center. And just fill in all the rest of that white space. I'm also going to color the bottom of that drum with this teal combo. I used the BG49 on the two corners because they were so small, so just one shade was fine to fill those in, but I will use all three shades on the rest of that drum. And then I'll use just the lightest shade, that BG32, to color in the cone of my cotton candy. For my top hat, I'm going to use C5, C7, and C9. I wanted to use some cool grays, so it looked a bit different from my elephant. I didn't want it to be too matching on that. Plus, I think the cool grays read a bit more black than the warm grays to me. And then for the stem of my flower, I'm going to use YG13 and YG17. And finally, for the cotton candy, I wanted a super pale pink, so I went with R000 and R00, so it has that super pale cotton candy look. And then I'm going to trim these images out with their matching dies. So the minute that I saw these Build a Campsite dies, I had the idea that it would be really cool to turn this into a circus tent and create a big top. So I'm going to put my dies onto another piece of white Spectrum Noir cardstock and run that through my die cutting machine. And then I'm going to pop those out of the dies. I just held them in place with a little bit of Post-it tape that I reuse over and over until it's no longer sticky. So once I have those dies popped out, I'm going to grab a pencil and draw some lines on them so I can have my red and white stripes. So I'm just kind of going with the shape of the flaps of the tent and making them wider at the bottom, just like it is on the die, and then getting narrower as it gets toward the top. And I figured it didn't have to be perfect because I'm going to have all of my critters and my girl in front, so part of it is going to get covered up there. I just need it to look a little bit like a circus tent. So I did 3 stripes on the bigger section and then just 2 on the smaller one. So those penciled lines are going to serve as a guideline for my stripes. I'm going to color the red sections in with the same red combo that I used earlier, which is R24, R29, and R39. Now you could also take the same black marker that I used earlier when I altered the drum and outline the lines here, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to have the black lines, if that would kind of mess up with the flap part once I got it on there, if it would just look right. So I opted not to do the black lines, but I think it would look good if you did as well. So that one would be up to you, but I just put the darkest on the 2 ends at the top and at the ends of the flaps, the R39, and then I blended it toward the center with the R29, and then I'm going to fill in the rest of the stripe with the R24, and then I'll do the rest of it off screen just to save some time in the video. You can kind of see what I'm doing here. And a lot of that shading ended up getting covered up by my critters anyway. So it all just depends on where you're going to end up placing your tent on the card. So I've got the red and white striped part of my tent done, and now I just wanted to create a little bit of an interior shadow on the main part of the tent, the base part I should say. So I went to my E42, E43, and E44, and I'm just scribbling some color on there to kind of create like some dark shadows that will just be able to be seen from the inner part of that tent flap. So I just darkened that up until I was happy with it, and also colored in the two little tent strings in case they would show. They ended up not showing, but I wanted them to be brown just in case. And then I'm going to glue the tent together using my Lawn Fawn glue tube. So I'm lining up that outer part of the die first, or of the tent, and then I'll take the inner part, which is supposed to be the open flaps, and I will glue that down right over top. To create my background, I'm going to use the Lawn Fawn Cloudy Stencil and some Salvage Patina Distress Oxide ink, and blend that onto a panel of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock. I thought it would be fun to use the Salvage Patina instead of my go-to tumbled glass because it has a bit more of that teal color to it, so it matches the teal in the coloring that I did. I did go ahead and go down this entire panel for the most part. A lot of it is going to get covered up, but when I'm creating, sometimes I don't know how much of a background is going to show, so I just go ahead and do the whole thing first and then kind of go from there. So I'm going to press a little bit of that ink onto my work surface and add some water to that, pick it up with a thin paintbrush, and then splatter that on my background just to create a little extra texture and movement on the scene. And then I'm going to set that aside to dry and move on to my cloudy border, which I'm going to turn into some bushes. So I die cut another piece of Bristol with the second largest of the puffy cloud borders, and I'm blending on some Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide ink. I'm going to start with that, and then I'm going to darken up the top edge with some Lucky Clover. I've really been loving the two of these together lately for grass and bushes and trees and things like that. So then I'll go back to my mowed lawn and just blend over the edge, and then I'm going to press some of both of those colors onto my work surface and add some more splatter detail. I feel like it looks like leaves on the bushes, so I think it gives it a lot of fun detail. So I'm going to do the mowed lawn first, just doing a little bit of that, and then add some of that Lucky Clover as well. And then I'll set this panel aside to dry, and I've got one more. This one I die cut with one of the Simple Stitch Hillside borders, and I'm going to color that in with some gathered twigs to look like the walkway in front of the circus tent. So that would have, you know, a lot of dust and dirt from all the foot traffic and all the wagons of the circus coming in. So I just thought a plain dirt background would be perfect for that. And then I'm also going to add some splatter detail to look like some extra little stones and texture in that dirt. Once all of these were dry, I trimmed them down with the outside in stitch rectangle stackables to give them that nice stitch detail on the outside edges. So I'm going to take that cloudy border that I turned into some bushes and add some more glue to the back of that, and then I'm going to glue that down on my background. And I wanted that to take up a good amount of the background scene so that you could really see it behind the big top. And then over top of that, I'm going to add my dirt walkway. Then I'm going to pop this into my MISTI so I can stamp my sentiment. And I'm using the Wish Big sentiment from Elfie Selfie. I stamped that down with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink because it lays so nicely over the Distress Oxides. And then I'm going to pop my card base in my MISTI, which is a piece of sticky note cardstock, and I'm stamping that in sunflower ink. I chose the other little elephant and the birthday cake from Elfie Selfie and the rest of the sentiment that says, "Have an unforgettable day." Then I'm going to take my background and I'm going to adhere that to my card base. So you'll get a little bit of that yellow sticky note cardstock showing through on the outside edges, which is going to tie in to the yellow in the coloring. And now I can begin to add my images, starting with that big top. I'm going to put that right to the side of that sentiment. So it's a little bit shifted toward the right. And then next I'm going to take the flag before that is glued down completely and add that to the top of the big top. Then I'm going to take my elephant and I'm going to do some extra cutting on him. Just taking a pair of Cutter Bee scissors and cutting around his ear so I can fit my girl on there a little bit better. I wanted the arm in front to be able to go in front of the elephant and the rest to tuck behind. So I also cut her arm a little bit until it fit on there nicely. And then I'm going to glue these two together so that they sit as one piece. And I'll put that down on the left-hand side, overlapping the left part of the tent flap. Then I'm going to take the drum and add that over on the right hand side, and I'm going to have the lion standing on that. And I noticed that just a little bit of that tent string was going to be showing, so I decided to just trim that off since you couldn't see it on the left hand side either. So that's going to just be behind the lion, which helps push that tent back even further and makes it seem further back, so it works better for the scale. And then I'll tuck the balloon cluster into the elephant's trunk. I just want to make sure that I don't cover up any of that sentiment, and I also wanted to make sure that the bottom of the string was tucked behind the trunk. I also cut apart the mouse's arms so that I could tuck the cotton candy cone into his hands. And then I'm going to glue that down as one piece between the elephant and the lion and try to make sure that that cotton candy is not overlapping his face. So I'm going to pull his face to be in front of that a little bit. And then I just thought it would be fun to give him the ringmaster's top hat just to kind of tie in the whole circus theme. So I was just kind of figuring out where I wanted that to go. I didn't want it to be in front of the elephant's trunk, so I pulled that up a bit so that I could tuck it underneath and just layered it over top. As a finishing touch, I wanted to add a bit of Stardust stickles to glam up this little circus scene. Had to add it to my little girl's dress to make that nice and sparkly. I also added it to the band of the top hat and the cotton candy and the center of the flower, and also to the little triangles on the drum. I put a little bit on the pennant banner on the top of the big top, and also to the 3 balloons. So I'm going to pick that up to the camera so you can see how that sparkles and shines, and I'll give you another peek at the inside. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. I had so much fun creating this card that I had this vision for, and I think it came out super cute. I hope you guys like it too. If you did, please hit that thumbs up and subscribe. Ring that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. I post new ones every Monday and Friday. If you're interested in any of the products I used, you'll find them listed and linked in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.